Hi, welcome back to the workshop. Today I'm going to show you how to smooth the edges of your leather before you start stitching, so you can get a really nice neat line of stitches before you do the actual finishing of the edge. So I've glued up an axe sheath and you can see it's got very rough edges. I've slightly exaggerated it just so you can see it on the camera, that the welt is sticking out a bit more than it should. It's a little bit rough because it's a slightly different type of leather within the two outer pieces, and we're going to take it from this rough looking piece to this, which gives your work a really nice finish and makes it look really nice and professional. So the first thing you've got to do, especially when it's sticking out as far as this piece of leather is get a sharp knife and just cut it off with a knife. Simple as that. So I just run along the edge like this and take off any large pieces that are sticking out. So I'm just going to run down there like that, and they come off quite easy. Make sure keep your knife nice and sharp. And then what I do is I take it over to my little grinder, which I'll show you now. So some people use a bobbin grinder. I've basically got some wheels in a pillar drill. I've got two grits. I've got a 40 grit, which I start off when it's very rough like this, and a 100 grit paper on this one. And I've also got an extractor just to take the main lot of the dust and the fluffy bits of leather away so they don't accumulate in the workshop. So I'm going to start it up and just show you how I do it. So what you want to do is give a nice even pressure and keep your piece of work exactly horizontal so it doesn't get an uneven edge. It's not on a slant. You want it to be perfectly horizontal, get a really neat edge along that side. And just glance at it now and again just to see how it's looking. And you don't want to take it back too far because you've got to leave space down that welt for your stitching. So just taking off enough to make a nice smooth edge. So that's the 40 grit done. So I've got most of the rough pieces off. So I'm going to go to the 100 grit now, pop that in. So there we go. You can see what a difference that makes and how quick it is. Now if you haven't got a pillar drill, or you haven't got a bobbin grinder, then you could use a very sharp knife and go over the whole lot, and then you could simply rub it onto some abrasive paper and you go down like that. You're just doing more of the elbow grease than I've used here. This machine's doing the hard work and I'm just holding it against it. So you can see how smooth that is. So now we're going to mark out our stitching, and it just makes all the difference to how neat that's going to look at the end of the process. So now we're back at the workbench, and I will show you how to mark out your stitching. So you take a soft pencil and just run along the edge of the leather, down one side and then up the other side. So it'll be in the centre of the welt that you've put inside. And now that we've got these lovely smooth edges, it makes the line really smooth all the way around, and that's key to making your stitches look really neat. Then I mark out the stitching with my little stitching wheel, and I run down the edge like so. Along there. And now I will stitch it. We've got another video on how to stitch, so you might want to watch that afterwards. So I've finished the stitching, and a great example to show you is that when you're actually stitching and pulling in that thread really tightly, it does show up sometimes a little frithy edge where you've squeezed it in and that's pushed out. So I'm just going to take that back to the grinder and just whiz that off to keep the edge nice and smooth. So now I'm going to use the edge beveler on the hard edges of the leather, and then I'm going to dye the edges and finish off the axe sheath. So here's the edge beveler, and I'm just taking off those 45-degree angles. Just run that down there and along here and down the other side. This just neatens it all up. I think we might have shown this before, but just taking you through the whole process all the way along. And then I've got some leather dye, this is just water-based leather dye. You can get oil-based and all different colours to suit your taste, but I'm just popping on some of this dark brown water-based dye. Paint it on with the dauber all the way along, and then I would leave that for a couple of minutes, and then I'd buff it up to get a really nice shiny edge. It just takes a little while to dry, and I'm usually happy with that. I'll just buff that off and then add my edge finishing balm onto it as well. But some people, and I've started to use it on some applications, use this called gum tragacanth, which is a very strange name, but basically it's the gum from a plant that comes from the Middle East, that's called goat thorn, and this is just basically Greek for goat thorn. Tragos, I think, is Greek for goat, and acanth is Greek for thorn. So it's basically a gum from a plant. This is used in cake making as well, which you coat on, and it gives a nice sheen to the leather. And for some leather that just won't go really shiny, nice and shiny, I will put that on. But most of the time this veg tan does shine up quite well. Some people use something called edge coat. That gives a bit too much of a sort of plasticky look to the leather, so I don't use edge coat, but for some applications it's quite good. But it does, for this sort of outdoory bushcraft leather, it leaves a bit of a looks like a plastic edge to it, which I don't really like, but these two things work pretty well for me. So I'm going to polish that up now and then add the leather balm. So that's all finished, and I'm going to see if the axe that it was made for actually fits. This is a small forest axe. Let's pop it in. Pop her on. Oh yeah, that looks good. That feels nice. So there we go. Project finished. Well, I hope that's given you a few tips for your own leatherwork projects, and at least given you a little insight into the work we do here at the Craft Lab. So hopefully see you next time.